A few years ago, POLYfjord released a tutorial on how to work with the Blender powerful rigid body simulation, where he also presented a final render dedicated to a cube that got away, which in my eyes was a great and cool looking concept art. And ever since, I've always wanted to make the same concept. Today we are going to create this scene from scratch. So without any further ado, let's get this going. So first let's add a cube. Press Shift A in the mesh, add a cube. Then press S and type down 0.2 to decrease its scale drastically. Then press numpad 1 to go into front view. Press G then Z and hold down the control key to put it exactly on the grid, like so. Now let's make some duplicates, but before that, it will make our lives much easier if we add the rigid body first. So with the cube selected, go to the physics panel and give it the rigid body. And since the cubes that we are going to add are supposed to fall down, we need to set the type on active, which is as a default. And now if we play, the cube will fall down, which is exactly what we want. One important tip, when using the rigid body, always make sure your scales are applied, which in our case is not. So we can press Ctrl A to apply the scale. Then press M to move it to a new collection and call it rigid bodies. Let's start the duplicating process. Press Shift D to make a duplicate. Don't touch anything, press Z, hold down the control key to put it exactly on the first cube. And if it does not work, that's because the scale of the cube is just too low. So you can also hold down the Shift key and then it will work. There it goes. So what we just did was only one action, and if we press Shift R, we can repeat the last action. So let's make 30 cubes. And there we have it. Select all of the cubes, press Shift D to make a duplicate, and this time press X, hold down the control key and move them by 2 meters. So this was only one action, and if we press Shift R, we can repeat that. Here is a tip. If you have a low PC, try to make less cubes, because since we are using rigid body, it might be pretty heavy for your PC. So I have made 30 rows of this stack of cubes, which makes 900 cubes. So let's go with that. Now to be sure they all work, press play, and yeah, there it goes. So let's add a ground plane. Shift A in the mesh, add a plane. Move it to somewhere around here, scale it up, press S, X, and scale it on the X axis like so. But now if we play, nothing actually happened, because we also need to make this ground plane a rigid body. So give it the rigid body. And another tip, we should set the type for the ground plane on passive, so that the active rigid bodies can collide with it and they don't fall down. And if we now play, there it goes. But if we take a closer look and wait a little bit, the cubes eventually start to fall down, and this is not what we are looking for. We need them to be static in one place until something hits them. So to fix that, go to the first frame, select the ground plane and press Ctrl I to invert the selection, which means now all of the cubes are selected. Hold down the Shift key and click on one of the cubes to make sure that there is an active object. Then go to the rigid body physics. And here we can see the dynamics. And to fix that problem, we need to enable these two, deactivation and start deactivated. So to apply the changes to all the selected objects, we need to hold down the Alt key and enable them. So now if you play, they are static in one place and don't fall down until another rigid body object hits them. So let's quickly make one. Shift A in the mesh, add a cylinder. Press S, Z to make it longer. Then press S, Shift Z to make it thinner. Then R, Y, 90. Move it back, then move it up. This would work. And this part is not necessary, but I like to do that. Go into edit mode, select this face, Shift S, cursor to selected. Then jump back into object mode, right click, set origin to 3D cursor. Now if you press SX, you get the idea. Also right click to shape auto smooth. So here is the big point. Since we are going to animate this, shall we call it a stick, this rigid body object, we need to enable the animated property for it. So give it the rigid body and then set it on passive and animated. Press Ctrl A to apply the scale. Now we can press play, press GX and see the result. You can interact with the objects real time. Now press F2 and rename it to stick. And by the way, select the ground plane, Ctrl A to apply the scale, rename it to ground plane. It is always nice to stay organized. Now select the stick and make sure you are at the first frame. Go to the object panel, right click on the X location and insert a single keyframe. Then move forward the CTI to somewhere around frame 175. This happened because it already made a catch, so don't worry about it. Move the stick on the X-axis because it is supposed to knock off all the cubes to somewhere around here and make another keyframe. Now let's play. So here something happens. Our animation ends before the timeline ends. So to fix that, in the timeline press A to select all the stick's keyframes. Then press Shift E to open the Set F-Curve Extrapolation and set them on linear extrapolation. Now if we play, our animation continues even after the timeline ends, which is a pretty nice and handy way to keep the stick moving if we want to increase the timeline frames, which we are going to do within a few seconds. And by the way, since we only have animated the X location, we can always move the stick up or down, which is pretty handy. And by doing that, we can get different results. So let's move it down a little bit. Now, in order to have access to the cubes and animate them, we should bake the simulation and then bake to keyframes, meaning every single cube will have a keyframe in each frame according to their movement and rotation. So to bake the rigid body, we should go to the scene panel. And here we can see the rigid body word. Open catch, and by default the rigid body will be simulated up to frame 250. So let's increase the timeline and then match the end frame of the catch to the end frame of the timeline. And then simply bake. So the simulation is baked, and now if we even delete the stick and ground plane, we have the simulation running, which is pretty important for us. So let me undo that, and now it is time to bake to keyframes. So select all the cubes and make sure there is an active object. Head over to the object, rigid body, and here you can see the bake to keyframes. The setting is just fine and just click on OK. It may take a little bit of time according to your PC and the number of the objects. So the process is done, and to see what exactly happened, we can select one of the cubes, and then in the timeline we can notice that Blender has generated a bunch of keyframes for that, which represent its movement, location, rotation, and scale. And the same thing happens to every other cube. So since we have keyframes, we can have access to each individual cubes. So let's quickly find a stack of cubes which is more stable than others. So let's go a little forward and take a look. I really like this one. I guess it is pretty fine. Yeah, I really like this one. And you may ask, this will fall down anyway, but don't worry about it. So let me quickly pick up the draw tool and make a mark here. So which one was that? I guess it was the 10th cube. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. This one. And let me check if I am right. Yeah, this is. So select it plus all the cubes below that. Then move forward the CTI to somewhere around here. I guess it is fine. Around here when this last hit happens. And select all the keyframes after the CTI. And press X to delete them. Let's take a look. Not bad. So let's put the CTI to somewhere around here. Select these keyframes and move them forward. Yeah, it is much better now. Let's take a look. Yeah, I really like that. So go to the first frame, select our hero cube, then press the / key to isolate it. And here our process of creating the club begins. So first of all, press F2 and rename it to hero cube. Then press M to move it to a new collection and also call it hero cube. Then press tab to go into edit mode. Select this top face, press P to separate it by selection. Jump back into object mode, select the separated face and again go into edit mode. Select it, press I to make an inset. Something like this looks nice. Again press P to separate by selection. Press A to select all the remaining faces. And let's give them some thickness, so press E to extrude them downward. That's fine. Jump back into object mode, select the last face that we have separated and go into edit mode. Press Ctrl R to add an edge loop over here. Select one of the faces and delete them. And let's give it some thickness, so select it, go to the modifiers panel, add modifier in the generate, give it the solidify modifier. And I guess the default setting is pretty fine, yeah. So now select this edge, press Shift S and cursor to select it. Jump back into object mode, press Shift A, in the empty add a plane axis. We have added this plane axis because we want to mirror this face, or shall I say call it hatch or door, on the other side. So let's right click, adjust empty display size and move the mouse to make it a little smaller. Press F2 and rename it to mirror object. Select the face, give it the mirror modifier. For the mirror object, choose the empty. And we want it to mirror on the y-axis. And there it goes. Again, go into edit mode, this time select this edge. Press Shift S, cursor to select it. Object mode, right click, set origin to 3D cursor. Why we did that? Now if we press RX, you can see the result. And don't forget to set the pivot point on individual origins. At least this one works better. Now press F2 and rename it to hatch. Select this part and rename it to, I don't know, top part maybe. Now we can start making the claw itself. So Shift S, cursor toward origin. Shift A, in the mesh add a cube. And scale it way down. And try to give it some variation on X, Y, and Z. So these are my numbers. Press R, Z 90. Then go into edit mode, front view. Select this bottom face and press S to scale it down. Just to give it some randomness. So this looks pretty nice. Then to add some more details, give it the bevel modifier. And the bevel is not working properly because we should apply the scale. Oh, that's too much. Let's set it on 0.002. Yeah, this looks pretty fine. Press F2 and rename it to club base. Then we can make some part. I guess it should be called fully, or I'm not pretty sure. It connects the base to the claw. So to make that, Shift A in the mesh, add a cylinder. It is pretty big. Open this drop down menu, rotation Y on 90 and decrease the radius and the depth. Move it up a little bit and set it on the base. So this looks nice. Then right click and shade auto smooth. And let's start giving it some modeling. So go into edit mode, select this face, press I to inset. This is fine and then press G and X to move it inside. Press I again to give it another inset. Then press Ctrl B to bevel. Then we can press E to extrude it outward. Let me take a look. This is fine. Now select this inner face and inset it once more. Except Ctrl B to bevel, accept, then press E to extrude outward. We have added some nice details. Now come over here and press Ctrl R to add an edge loop here. Go into wireframe and select all these faces, press X to delete them. Now in the modifiers panel, give it the mirror modifier. And we want it to be mirrored on the Z axis. There it goes. Then give it the bevel modifier. And by the way, you can press Ctrl 2 to give it a subdivision modifier by level of 2. And if you drop it before the bevel, you will get even a different look. This might be what you are looking for, but I'm going to go without it. Now let's move it aside, because we are going to mirror it. So I just went into edit mode, select these faces, and just move them a little forward. It's pretty easy on the x-axis, which I guess looks a little better. Let's put it here, then press Shift S, cursor to world origin. To be sure, 3D cursor is at the world origin. Then press Shift A in the empty, add another plane axis. Let's move it up. Right click, adjust empty display size and make it a little smaller. Then press F2, rename it to mirror object 2. Select the fully, go to modifiers panel and give it another mirror modifier. For the mirror object, choose the empty. And we want it to be mirrored on the y-axis. There it goes. Then press F2 and rename it to fully 1. The next step is to model the claw itself. So Shift A in the mesh, add a cube and scale it way down. Scale it on the y-axis, make it thinner. Let's move it up somewhere around here, scale it down on the x-axis. Move it over here, front view, go into edit mode, select this face, this top face, press S and scale it down to get a shape like this. You get the idea. So this is our shape, and let's give it a bevel modifier. Bevel, Ctrl A, apply the scale just to be sure, and let's give it 0.001. That's enough. Then give it the mirror modifier. And for the mirror object, again choose our empty, and we want it to mirror on the y-axis. There it goes. And rename it to claw 1. So this was the first half of the claw. For the second half, select the fully, press Shift D and move it up. And put it here. And we can give it some randomness. First of all, we need to scale it down on the x-axis. And then we can press S, Shift X. And scale them up on the Y and Z. And don't worry about the intersection. Yeah, this looks pretty fine. And rename it to fully 2. Then select the claw, Shift D and move it up. Go into edit mode, select this bottom face and scale it down on the x-axis. And do the same thing with the top face. Let's take a look. Yeah, this looks pretty fine. And simply rename it to claw 2. Now let's rig this claw. So select the first fully, Shift S, cursor to selected. Then press Shift A and add an armature. Go to Armature data panel. In the viewport display, set the display as to a stick, just to have a better look, and also enable in front, so that we can have easy access to that. Now select the second fully, Shift S, cursor to selected. Then select the bone, go into edit mode and select this top face. This one. Shift S, selection to cursor. There it goes. Then press E to extrude it. And it doesn't matter where you put it. Go into object mode, select the claw 2. Go into edit mode, select this top face, Shift S, cursor to selected. Jump back into object mode, select the armature, go into edit mode, make sure this top head is selected, Shift S, selection to cursor. Now we can go into object mode. The next step is to parent the claw parts to the bones. And we want to parent the claw and fully 1 to the bottom bone. So with the armature selected, press Ctrl Tab to go into pose mode. Select this bottom bone and jump back into object mode. and Blender will remember which bone you have chosen. Select the claw and fully one, then shift select the armature, press Ctrl P and choose bone. Now if we select the armature and go into pose mode, press RX, you get the idea. And as a result, we want to parent the claw 2 and fully 2 to the top bone. So select the top bone and jump back into object mode. Select the claw and fully 2, then shift select the armature to make sure it is an active object. Press Ctrl P and then bone. Now we can go into pose mode to see everything is fine. RX. Yeah, it is working pretty fine. Go back into object mode and I think we can increase the bevel for the claw 0.002. And here's a point that could come in handy later. Press N to open the side menu. In the item, you can see that the rotation mode for this bone is set on quaternion WXYZ. So it will be much easier for us to set it on XYZ Euler and do the same thing for this bone, which was already there. And let's clear the rotation. Now select the armature, shift select the empty, finally shift select the base to make it the active object. Ctrl P, object, keep transform. Now this base controls them. And let's finish the modeling part by making that part that extends. So let's move the base aside, shift S, cursor to world origin, shift A in the mesh, add a cylinder. Let's decrease the radius, then decrease the depth. So something like that looks nice. Then go into edit mode, select this top and bottom faces. Press I to inset them a little bit. This seems fine. Then right click and choose bridge faces. There it goes. Also right click to shade auto smooth. Now press shift A and in the empty, this time add arrows, just to give it some variation, and it will be much easier for us to select it later. Decrease the size a little bit and rename it to Array Object Offset. Select the extension part and let's rename it to Extensive. And in the modifiers panel, give it the Array modifier. Disable the relative offset and enable object offset. For the object, choose our new empty. Now if we select the empty and move it up, you get the idea, but it is not working properly. There is two important points here. First of all, you shouldn't scale down or up, neither of them. And if we take a look at the scale of the extensive part, we can see it's pretty messed up. So Ctrl A to apply the scale. Now we can select the empty and move it up or down and get the result. So let's select the extensive part and in the modifiers panel for the array modifier, set the count on 5. So that we will have 5 different instances. And now we can get that result by decreasing the scale of this empty. So in the object panel, set the X and Y on somewhere around 0.76. Now it is working pretty fine. This is looking pretty fine and we can slightly decrease this, 9.8. And if we want to reset this, you can select the empty and press Alt G, so that it goes in place. This is looking pretty fine. Now to assemble all the parts together, select our hero cube, Shift S, cursor to selected. Then select the extensive part and it's empty, Shift S, selection to cursor. There it goes. And finally, select the claw base, Shift S, selection to cursor. Let's take a look. Let's open the hatch, RX. You can see our claw is just too big, so we should close the claw. First of all, select the base, and it will make our life much easier if we select the hero cube. Go to the object panel. In the viewport display, we set the display as to wire. Then select the claw base and move it all the way down, somewhere around here, so that it won't poke out of the hero cube. Then select the armature, Ctrl Tab to go into pose mode. The bottom one is fine. Select the top one, RX, and close it. And don't worry about this part. It won't be visible anyway. Go into object mode, select the hatch, Alt R. I'm not pretty sure why isn't that combination is working for me. Maybe that's because it is a shortcut in the screen recorder that I am using right now. So we can go here and set it on 0. Now, since this cube is our hero cube, we should select the extensive part and also the club base, and finally shift select the hero cube as the last object. Ctrl P, object, keep transform. Now this hero cube deserves its name, not completely. So let's select this empty hatch and top part, and finally shift select the hero cube. Ctrl P, object, keep transform. And there it goes. Now we are done with the club. So we can press the forward / key again to exit the isolation mode. And it is pretty nice that we have set a display as type of this hero cube on wire. We can have easy access to that.